I'm Thomas Nixon, Baseline co-founder. I have a technical background. I've been building apps for years. It's something I'm really passionate about and seeing startups succeed. So I've been working in an agency, Davika, previously, and in that agency we built Baseline. I'll get into Baseline more. But where I wanted to start off, I really wanted to throw you guys a curveball because it's 4:20. I want to show you something you're not expecting. If you know, you know. So when I learned how to code, I learned Quick Basic. And there was a certain magic to it. And I learned it through trial and error, running code, typing code, looking it up, reading other people's code. And the thing that really helped me learn quickly was I could just press F5 and my code would run. I could see it. I could mess with it and then make some changes, run it again. And that cycle of being able to do this meant I could learn really quickly. And it has a lot of real benefits when you're building applications in business. So I've recently been listening to the Phoenix Project again. It's a book. It's an interesting book worth listening to. And it talks about how fast feedback loops are important in software development. Because the faster you can actually make changes, the quicker you get changes out there, you make more progressive changes, less things bottleneck you, and you can actually respond a lot quicker. If you have slow pipelines, if you have slow code changes, if you can't run your code for a week and all you can do is read it or wait for a build, or how are you going to get changes out quickly and how are you going to fix stuff when it breaks? All of this is very important when you're building apps. And when I first came into serverless, look, I'm not going to lie. First week I was working, I couldn't run my code. It was infuriating. So I could only run it when we deployed it. There was reasons behind this. We fixed them. But it was that frustration that made serverless really hard for me to access from that get-go of, hey, we have this whole app, but I can't run this little piece that I'm trying to use, and I can't even run it in the app itself. How do I learn this stuff? And the promise of serverless is great. It sounds fantastic on paper. It sounds like it is the answer to a lot of problems. And we had been working on trying to make that easy, and we're frustrated because you'd use these tools, you'd use these buzzwords, and it would be so frustrating to put together, end to end. You'd have to spend heaps of time learning how specific things work, and you'd have to figure out what you didn't know as well, and what you did know, and how to configure it for default, and test it, and have it fail, or have it fail at its scale, or have it blow out in cost. And it's not like you have a VM or a container where there's levers you can pull, you know the environment, you know where your logs are, you know if you have more CPU and more RAM, if you have it compiled differently, all these things, you can pull these levers. In serverless, you don't have the same levers. It's a different environment. And that transition really was difficult for me at the start because I didn't know how I could trust this platform to run my code. And if you can't trust something that's going to run your business, you're going to fall back to something else you trust. And I think leaning into serverless, if we can build more trust in how you can build applications, that's going to go a long way with people working with serverless. So there's this phrase, serverless first. There's a quote on the AWS site, it's not this, that's essentially prioritize using serverless features. I'm like, cool. So when we're building our serverless first app, cool, let's use all the buzzwords, let's make our own GraphQL endpoint, let's use Lambdas and DynamoDB and Cognito, it'll be a great time. Well, it was worse than building on a monolith. It was an absolute nightmare. Timing issues, code deploy issues, package management blowout, cost blowout, we did it all. We went through it all. But there was glimmers of like this really hopeful thing that could just scale on demand, that you could spin up new environments really quickly. But there's all these little hesitant things that didn't quite fit together. So I think when you're thinking serverless first now, it's not just, hey, let's pick the tools. It's the infrastructure. It's the code. It's the tools all combined in an optimal way for this environment that makes it easy to utilize serverless. So you probably didn't guess, but I'm going to talk about Baseline. it's a full stack framework, but in the sense that we looked at every use case a developer goes through a project, and we wanted it to cater to those needs. We didn't want to just leave a gap. We didn't want to just solve one vertical. We wanted to glue that holds it all together. Done, let's build an application. And we want it to be serverless first. And it's TypeScript front and back to make it easier for hiring, to make it easy to build on, code reuse, monorepo, all the fun stuff. And we want it hosted in your own AWS account with full control of the code. We wanted minimal abstraction layers, so the code that is baseline is the code that's your app. The same, one in the same, no abstraction layers. So this is a little bit against the grain here, because we didn't wrap it in everything. So what do we end up using? PnPM for monorepo, TypeScript, ESBuild to make it a little bit faster, React Invite, again, ESBuild, and Node.js, and still using Express on the back end. Obviously, we wanted to focus on end-to-end, so prettier, ESLint in there, actually working too, not one dev with his plugin that doesn't quite work. We want to make sure that it works. And then we're still using the serverless framework simply because of the serverless offline plugin, which makes it really easy to run stuff locally. And we've worked with it a lot and got the glue around it to make it a really great experience, as well as CIs out of the box. So really easy to deploy. And we've picked and tested working all these services together through years of trial and error. We've built over 100 startup apps with Baseline. It's not just a hello world example, it's stuff that you can build on top of for 5 years and still not regret it. We've seen the 5 years and there's lessons like, hey look, I have 300 endpoints and now I can't add any more. Lots of fun API gateway. And we wanted to keep it simple with as few dependencies as possible. So Baseline's only about 5,400 lines of code. And yes, you can pick apart the SCSS and the Markdown and all this, and technically it's less. So it's pretty exciting. And the way we build isn't microservices. And it's not a lambda-lith. But it feels like you're working with a monolith, but it builds out into essentially objects that are the lambdas. So you have multiple endpoints for that object or entity, and then they run and they reuse and access other things. So each one is packaged with only what it uses. I assume people are going to have questions about this. Come find me later. I'll do the whole crazy conspiracy look when I explain it too. But again, we focused on all the use cases from shipping to production, everything in between, including like, hey, we're probably going to have a staging and production environment and run it locally. So, you know, environment variables need to work in that, infrastructure needs to work in that, a whole bunch of things need to work with this. And adding it after fact, that's not a good time. So there's a lot of benefits to using Baseline. I know this sounds markety, but there's all the different stages of the development cycle that we've factored in for saying it's 6 months worth of development. You can argue every sort of way, but if you don't solve some things and they just drag out forever, it accelerates that lost time of trying to catch up later. So we found that over time as well, the faster you can keep moving with Baseline, it really adds up. You can keep ahead of this curve, and it can cost you a lot less in the long run. So, how do you get started with Baseline? Well, we open sourced it last week. We've been working on this for 5 years, and it's out, warts and all, for everyone to see. And we're welcoming people to give feedback and whatnot. We're actually going to stand up a Baseline app now. Slightly terrifying, some sweaty palm action. So we're going to go from scratch to having it deployed, and we're going to try and zoom in for it. So, oh boy. That's nice. All right, so let's see if it works. So it's basically the same as create React app. Give it a name, demo. And this gives us our project. Monorepo setup, everything. Wasn't an error, so that's a good sign. And we'll open up the code. Let's get a test. Good size? Yep. All right, so we've got a README. We'll go down to the setup. And so we can actually just install the packages. So since it's monorepo, we'll install it all for each package. And that won't take very long. And then we set up the name of the project and which region it's in. Ooh, I thought it was going to take too long to download there for a second. And this basically sets up the environment variables into the project and makes it easy to deploy and have the right naming and everything in the cloud environment. So if we now do the setup, we give it the name demo. We can pick the region, 18. Yes, it's hard-coded. Yes, I'm looking for a better solution. Please tell me. And what we would normally do is run this AWS profile config. And this lets you put credentials in. Since the serverless framework doesn't work with SSO easily, this is a stopgap, but it also lets you use the credentials in the profile. So there's no, hey, let's use the AWS default config. The whole project is set up for profile. So everything is referenced as profile for this stage, so you can work on multiple projects very easily. Not going to run it because I already put them there, so I didn't have to show you guys my keys. And we can actually just deploy that now. So this is going out there, deploying an API, deploying a web app, and deploying an admin portal. And to save us some time, CloudFront is already deployed, so it's not going to take too long. But you can see it's packaging it up there, and this whole pipeline, while this is for the setup, you can keep using this, but obviously you'd normally use the CI and CD that comes with it, and set it up with OpenID Connect. So let's see how this thing goes. We also wanted to make this experience use the AWS console as little as possible. We wanted it to mostly be here, so we've tried to streamline it. Our original baseline version took us 8 hours to stand up. It was wild. You had to copy things from here, copy, paste it over there, connect these things over there. It was not a good time. So we focused on this really seamless sort of transition to the point of even trying to focus on getting the URLs for the environment that we're standing up instead of digging into a CloudFormation stack. Working with AWS, it's fantastic how much technology is there, but it still feels like you can't wrap up your app as an application in the console. So it's usually you fishing the stuff out of different places or looking at your CloudFormation and then tracking stuff down, which can make it really hard to have visibility on your app and what's being used. So that's deployed now. We're going to add a user. So rather than having to hack this in some messy way, it adds it to Cognito and to DynamoDB. So out of the box, you have it working. And if you're a dev joining the project later, you just make your user rather than have to find someone who has credentials already and go through a nightmare. So we'll just make Thomas. I swear this is a super secret password. And that's created it. And we'll just get these URLs now. All right, so we have our app that's deployed to the cloud. We wanted it to have the default URLs to make sure that it was easy to deploy and you didn't have to set up a whole Route 53 type thing or anything like that, and the admin portal. So we can actually just log in with that user we created already, and we have authenticated backend with database for admin users right here, account setup, sign in, sign out, all of that, all set up. So pretty easy to get going, and then we can dig into all the code. So what we can do now is actually, that we have this set up, is we can run it locally. So we can manage all the environment variables as well. It stores them in AWS. So there's no, hey, where's that .m file that I can use to work locally? And you super securely don't pass it around on Slack. Never done that in my life. We can actually generate the environment variables, and this will make it work for whichever environment you're in. So if you need the staging one, you can do that, or your production one. Obviously, you need credentials to do that. So to start the API, we can actually run it locally. Now, this will automatically download local DynamoDB, inject seed data into it, and then give you the endpoints running, as well as let you access it from the front end stuff as well. So we're going to be able to act like it's the app. Again, this is using the serverless framework offline. We've tried some other solutions, but we haven't found something that is quite as good an alternate. We know it's not perfect representation of the cloud, but as far as response time and being able to iterate, it's fantastic. So let's just start a new terminal. We'll see Vite spin up. There it is. So open that. And we'll start web anyway. All right, so same. And we've got this dashboard again. And we mocked the Cognito user. So while we logged in there, that's simply because it's the front-end amplifier library for now. When it's working, because of the seed data, you need a default user to reference for anything that's related to that user. So we actually mock the user sub on the back end, which has been really helpful because you can have different data sets for different users that you can then specifically start the API for. Or you can actually hook it up to Cognito if you really wanted to. So as you can see, we've got some seed data here. Now, the great thing about this is, this seed data is in the repo. So everyone has the same seed data. There's not, oh, my environment this, or my environment that. Or, oh, it broke when it went to staging. Well, something went wrong there. We can delete everything, and it will just reappear when you start the API again. So it's a really great way to have data that shows the features off and test them and use it and see it working, and to show you what's expected of those data sets too. And everything's hot reload except for the infrastructure part. So what we'll do is we'll actually ship a change to the staging environment now. So we'll find this code. Just in case I haven't said baseline enough. Hot reload, look, fantastic React stuff, magic. And we can actually just go back to here, and we can just run that staging deploy again. So when you deploy, it catches everything up in it. So if you change the backend, the changes in the backend go out, changes in the front end, changes go out. This also does the cache validation. So none of that messing up /star handled for you. So the changes go out very easily. You can ship stuff really simply, and it looks pretty good in the pipelines. Deploy time is about 7 minutes, 8 minutes. That stays pretty consistent over time as well. The longest one is usually just the first setup because CloudFront. So this is about to go out. Yep. So if we look at that one that's deployed again, just refresh it. Okay, we're good. Live demo, sweaty palm time. Yeah, so that change went out really easily. So cool, what else can we do? Well, we've got some time still, so let's add some more infrastructure. So we have these things called baseline commands, and you can add commands to your repo, to your code, essentially, and they're packaged up individually. So by default, we have one called add object. Now, this actually injects code into your code base. So all the code for this command is in the code base as well, and it generates new endpoints. So you can actually modify that template to your own project specifics and start using those if your requirements change, or you have different tooling. Again, you have all of the code, so if you specifically prefer something else, you can change any part of this. So let's give that a go. I've been racking my brain all day about what object to call it. We're going to go with attendee today. All right, so we'll just give it. Now this is a very basic little command thing. Like I'm not super impressed by my little thing here, but it is a great example. Oh no, that was nearly bad. All right, so it's a string. It's not required. Last name. Let's keep it simple. And we generated a whole bunch of files. Cool. What are these files? We've got type, so just some type stuff. We have the service, so there's a generic service object that comes with essentially write operations, read operations, all the things you expect. We do have a custom DynamoDB library as well that's open source, that's separate to Baseline, but Baseline uses, that has like connection pulling through HTTP connection. So I'd recommend trying it out if you feel like making Dynamo a little bit easier and a little bit faster. We got the seed data as well, so we can actually just throw some seed data in here. We'll see if, oh, okay, that's not quite right. Great ID. Not quite again. And perfect. That's okay. That's some good data. And we've got the function, so it adds the serverless YAML essentially for the functions. Has the authorizer attached, and we have the DynamoDB definition as well, automatically added, as well as the API code. So looks like Express, smells like Express, works like Express. Nothing too complicated because you can add whatever tool you need for your use cases. Again, Baseline's made to be able to build a CMS, a SaaS, a marketplace, a mobile app, whatever you need. We didn't want to put a whole bunch of features in you have to delete or deal with the dependencies from. That's not much fun dragging code with you, especially when you don't know what you can and cannot delete. So we can actually just start the API now. So if we just, and that kicks it off again, and it'll load up that new DynamoDB table as well as those new endpoints, and we can actually just, we'll see them, a link here for them. And since we mock the API user, we can ignore credentials a little bit, and we can get that data in very, very small text. But essentially, that's the seed data. So easy way to add it, and then to deploy it, you just run deploy again. It's that simple. So that's Baseline. We've got, what, 5 more minutes? Yeah. No one's saying no, so yep. Do we have any questions, if I can get away with it? No one's saying no. Anyone?
Any questions? Does anyone have their hand up? Yes.
Timing.
Hello.
I did.
I was having a look at your documentation. Is that still a work in progress?
It is. I said warts and all, I wasn't lying. We're going to change how it's hosted as well, so that's coming. We want to get it out there so that we get feedback and start iterating over the top of it. Essentially, it's going to be a continued work in progress.
Yeah, okay. I was interested to know how you could create new objects, but that doesn't really tell you.
You can actually see it all in the GitHub. It's pretty straightforward. It just injects the code through a template. It's just using handlebars. Anyone else?
Any other questions? Oh.
So I see that Baseline is based around serverless framework. Do you have any concerns with serverless framework 4.0, which for certain enterprise sizes becomes a licensed product? What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, so in picking the serverless framework, it's the one that let us most easily run stuff locally as well as split the definitions out into multiple files. I know you can sort of do this with other ones, but it was the most simplistic way to do it, and we've come to trust how it operates. It hasn't changed a whole bunch. We've experimented with implementing other things. The licensing is definitely an issue. We don't want to put a license in that restricts you straight away. If you're a larger company, we don't want to be like, cool, go just get a subscription when you start because now you're using their product. We don't know what's going to happen yet. If certain tooling picks up features that we need, we'll probably look at swapping. But for now, this is very reliable for us and it works quite well. If you replace all the stuff that's, say, the serverless framework in this, that whole process of what we just went through is essentially the same to interact with. It just generates some different stuff. So we'd really love to see, say, SAM or something run local a bit better or have files split out and be able to use that functionality because that's really the only thing sort of holding us back. Anyone Anyone else? All right. Perfect. Well, if you do try it, please give us a GitHub star. We'd love it. We'd also love feedback. Even if it's, oh my goodness, why did this not work? I want that feedback. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Thomas.